I think we're live.
Hi,
Yes, I think.
we're live. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Z, and I'm the moderator for this evening. Well, this morning here in Barbados still. But I'm the moderator today. My name is Z, and I'm the founder of Pink Coconuts. And I would allow my guests to introduce themselves. Can we start with Laura?
Hi, so my name is Laura Laban. I'm a CEO and co-founder of a company called Infinite Flight. So we make a flight simulator of the same name. It's a simulator on phones and tablets. I'm currently living in France, and my pronouns are she and her.
You can go, Atom.
Thank you. And my name is Atom. I'm a co-founder and COO of TomTex. And at TomTex, we create a new generation of biomaterials, and we start with leather, and we are aiming like high-end fashion industry, and working with brands here, both in New York as well as in Europe and across the continents to come up with different like designs that you start to use novel material that we come up with.
Wonderful, Atom Amphibian.
Hi everyone, I'm Fabien, the founder and CEO of Bunny Money, which is a banking app for personal and workplace giving. My pronouns are he, him, and calling from San Francisco, California. Nice to be with you.
Yeah. Wonderful. And my pronouns are he, she, they. I'm pronoun agnostic. So should we get into it?
Yes.
Let's go.
So we're talking about the impact of immigration and LGBT entrepreneurship. So I'll start with Laura. Laura, can you kindly just tell us about your company and tell us one thing that one time being an immigrant has helped or hindered your startup journey?
Hmm.
So my company, we work on a flight simulator for phones and tablets. Um, it's a project that I created when I was a student here in France, and then I moved to the US to work for NVIDIA for a few years. And then this project that I was working on the side on, a friend of mine, we decided to kind of join forces and make this like a full-time thing. And obviously, when I was working for NVIDIA as a new employee, I was an H1, I was with an H1B visa at the time. So no options to leave, even if we wanted to make it a company, like an actual company, we can leave. And so the creation of the business had to wait until I could get some kind of visa or status that could allow me to create a company, to leave my full-time job and create the company. And the main issue when you're on an H-1B visa is that it's very hard to move on to something else. And I was lucky. I lucked out at the green card lottery, and this is what really helped me. That I guess, and that's the helpful part. Like it really helped me gain a lot of time in my immigration process to get everything going. Simplified the immigration with my spouse, and I could leave my job, my full-time job, to actually work full-time on Infinite Flight. And just briefly, what we do is a flight simulator that's on iOS and Android. So it's like some people consider it as a game. We consider it as a serious game, and more today as a training platform for pilots.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Laura.
No problem.
Atom?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, like at Tomtex, we are creating different like biomaterial, and we start with leather, and we work with brands in New York and also in Europe, like LVMH, to come up with different like design and different applications for the high-end luxury. And back in the days, like so how I started this company, that like I started this company with my best friend. We both are from Vietnam, and we had like first-hand experience on how like our country has been like, polluted by the I would say like the waste from the rest of the world, like dumping it into like countries, and we wanted to do something together in the sustainability field. And as an immigrant founder or co-founder, um, I think like luckily I didn't have issue with the documents like Laura. However, as like an Asian immigrant, like I faced other like challenges. For example, like in the funding or fundraising, it was very difficult at first to actually prove myself to the investors, which majority is like old white men, and also we are in sustainability field, which is very new and very, I would say like trendy, but like very newly developed in the past, I would say like 10 years. So like there are a lot of like unknown or like knowledge that not that many people are aware of. So like we have to work much harder than we thought or we expected in order to convince the investors and to convince our clients.
Yeah. Yeah. Fabian?
Yes, my I guess my immigrant story is really like, moving 16 years ago. At the time, and it was before I was an entrepreneur. It was fairly easy for me. It was a L1 visa, moving with an existing company, but it was much more challenging for my partner, now husband, because was a nurse anesthetist, and it's a specific visa, and at the end he never got it, and because same-sex unions were not recognized, he couldn't benefit from my L1 visa. And so for almost like 10 years, we've been doing like back and forth with France. While I was settling in the US, he was still in Paris. And that was challenging on the personal side. Um, when I arrived in the US, I would also say like, because of the thick accent, that was challenging. And many people were really thinking that I was very junior in terms of the role, what I was doing. I was barely speaking English when I moved, and even like setting up the utilities was number one challenge. Calling PG&E in California and getting things ready,
Yeah.
that was daunting.
Yeah.
But then after that, I guess you build also some confidence overcoming those challenges, and I think that really helped me to quickly become self-employed and then an entrepreneur and starting Bunny Money. So Bunny Money is really an app to help you set aside some money and support causes that you like. And when you're immigrant, you also like come with a new perspective because you've seen things working differently where you come from and how it works here. And it's very true also on the financial space. Like relationship to money is very different in Europe than in the US, and really inspire me to get things done a little bit differently with that app and brings up both a little bit of the two worlds in a way. So it's really also part of the journey and the building of Bali Money.
Yeah, absolutely. And being an immigrant and being an entrepreneur and being LGBT is about struggle. Sometimes it's about risk and it's about struggle. So I feel like even in all of those identities, we kind of marry a lot of character in all of these. So another question for you. How does entrepreneurship experience in the US compare with where you're from? Anybody can jump in, or choose use Atom.
uh, I have been here for more than half of my life, so maybe I don't have the real experience of like the
Yeah.
um, startup scene in Asia. But I think like here in the US, we have more resources in terms of like support, in terms of knowledge, and in terms of finance. So definitely way better than in Asia for sure. But Asia is catching up really quickly, and in terms of the mindset, I think like everyone has as when they want to start something on their own, they already have the entrepreneur or like a mindset, and they work really hard to achieve their goal, right? So I don't think there's any difference for that. um, and as well, I think like community support community is very I would say not difficult to have, but like more limited to have in Asia than here in the US. Because like in the US, the infrastructure is already there. It's been for so long, especially in the Silicon Valley, and you can see the difference between Silicon Valley versus New York versus maybe like Midwest. So if you start in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of like opportunities, a lot of people who are always like willing to help you. You just have to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there
I
any
think
other thing?
yeah, for France, like the mindset was different. At least when I moved, and moving to the US, I had a little bit in mind already, like, entrepreneurship, because it's a country where you can make things happen. And I think it's still true. Like, when you think about it, like, even with your SSN, you're already a company. You can already do, be a self-employed and invoice and things like that. Um, but beyond that, I think that it's more accepted to fail, which makes a difference compared to maybe Europe. Or I believe things are changing in Europe, but at the time, like, it's more accepted here that you can fail and that you are less, risk adverse and more protection, and so you just go for it. And that's, I think, it's a difference of culture, but it's a significant one, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. And Laura?
Well, for me, I left France when I just finished my studies, so I'm kind of back here as first time adult in France. So I don't have a lot of experience in the actual startup world in France, but I do have experience with people that talk to me about it when entrepreneurs move to the U.S. from France, and a lot of them talk about all the overhead with employees, all the issues they had with hiring and firing people, which is very easy in the U.S. Um, there's also one like the kind of bouncing off what Fabian said, like the failing aspect is very it's in France you can see this already when you're studying. Usually there's like one path to education, and you rarely see people in their 30s going back to school in France. It's just like you've had your shot, you're done. So it's very like one way. Um, and like every time I'm back in the US, I can feel like the energy, like the that you can almost do anything. Like a company like Tesla or SpaceX in France, you get buried under tons of paperwork and people telling you no every step of the way. Um, and I think there's one aspect that makes life easier in France, I think, is all the safety net, the social safety net. When I left my company and I left NVIDIA in the US, I was Ubuntu Cobra, which was great for a year and a half, as long as it lasted, even though it was expensive. But it was before Obamacare, so I had to transition over to like the old system, which asked me a ton of questions. We had pre-existing conditions, all that stuff, which I don't really have to worry about here in France. It's just you go to the doctor and it's covered, and it makes it much easier when you want to start something. You can just leave and not think about the fact that you won't have insurance or you won't be able to pay for it.
Oh, yeah, just one last thing that I would like to add on is similar to the failure acceptance that Fabian and Laura mentioned. Like, it's also, I see that in Asia too. I think it's just more like a cultural thing that in US people more freely talk about their ideas, but like in Asia, I think like the culture is like you don't talk about your idea, because like everyone has an idea until like you come up with something like tangible to show, right? And then you can talk about your entrepreneur journey or something, or just that. So that's, I think, like one of the biggest differences that I see.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's especially for being immigrant and being LGBTQ, there are some similarities there with being in a space that, is not always entirely suited for you, if I might say. So one other question I wanted to ask is, what's your experience with the layered identity of being an immigrant and being LGBTQ, and what has that been like for you? We can start with Laura.
So for me, like my experience is quite different from what you all experienced, because when I my whole immigration experience was before I transitioned. So I was, white male, blonde, tall, like all the doors were opening. We didn't have to raise any funding, so that was the lucky part. But I'm pretty sure it would have been just a smooth, track to even try to do that, because my business partner is also is a male as well. So that part like the beginning of it, the creation of the company was pretty smooth. The issues I think came afterwards, but I was already a citizen at the time, so it was mostly about having different French and American papers, like traveling around the world with passports that don't have the same names can sometimes cause problems. And you have to explain to immigration officials in a country you're not super comfortable disclosing that information, why you can actually go through that line and not the other one. And the other part I would say is for me in the industry I'm in, the aviation industry and kind of the gaming part. It's very male dominated, and it's sometimes causing issues. And I can kind of see I guess the bias, that the gender bias, and what people like, the way people treat me now when I'm going flying, or like when I'm with a friend who's male and I land my plane. People are going to assume that the pilot is the guy, not me. And it has never happened before. Or they're going to assume I don't know how to fill up my tank, or like these kinds of things. Or it happens. And I can see the difference. I can see how I was treated before versus now. And the last part is on the flight simulation project that we're on. The community is pretty large, and we have people from all over the world. And obviously, transitioning in the midst of that community raised some concerns, because there's people from countries where transitioning is literally legal, and they're still on live stream. They watch us, they watch what we do. So we also have to have like people on our live streams moderate some of the comments, because usually because of my voice, people are going to kind of talk about and say what's going on with Laura and some comments, and we have to block people and ban it. But it's just how it is.
Yeah. Fabian, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. My story is also a little bit different. I guess we're all like experiencing things like differently. For me, it was more a challenge to be like immigrant in a way compared to LGBTQ. Why I do remark that usually people like think the opposite. Often ask like how was it like challenges being like LGBTQ founder or person or at work. Yes, I was lucky in my own like career. Like when I started 20 years ago, I was out at work, and everyone was supportive, so it was a good experience. I think being an immigrant, there is also some bias that people like don't realize. Like I was saying, like because of the accent, they think that you don't know what you're talking about, that you don't know. Sometimes you're not that connected in the country where you arrive, obviously, because it takes time. But I do think there is also a bias, a different one compared to LGBTQ. And that's the one that I actually experienced the most in my life, which can be surprising. And so sometimes where I'm surprised, because luckily there are many programs that support LGBTQ entrepreneurs. They are a little bit less on the immigrants side, and so it's really up to you to join some communities, but they are not that easy. Like there are many. I mean, there are more people, more programs for BIPOC and LGBTQ founders nowadays, but again, not so much for immigrants. And so where I feel like I could actually help many entrepreneurs to really thrive in their new countries if they were a little bit more empowered, could be a good accelerator as well. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I think like as I mentioned earlier, again, being an immigrant, especially from Asia, is very difficult to prove yourself to investors here, and also like doing something that like in the software industry is like come up with a new product is much faster in terms of timeline versus like we are in the intersected world of like fashion versus biomaterial. So sometimes it takes a lot longer time to come up with an MVP, and because like if you build a software, you can like the investor can double check your code or something like to make sure that it's real. But like in the biotech, it's very difficult to do that, especially during the pandemic. Like when you show the material over Zoom or something, it's like people, oh yeah, but like how about like a touch and a feel of the material, and that is added up to my physical like difference when I have to like pitch myself or the company to the investors.
Yeah, yeah. So this question is I'm gonna start with Atom for this question. It's a question
Yes.
that you suggested that I love. Um, have you found that some startup sectors are more welcoming to immigrants than others, and what are they, and what have been your experiences?
Yeah, so I work in as a professional. I worked in various industries before. So I think like the industries that has more focus on creativity, for example, that the industry that I am in right now is fashion. Is like I think like traditionally, fashion has always been more open to LGBTQs or like to non-traditional like genders, right? And but like versus in fintech that like has always been for 100 years, more than 100 years, like all white men that is like dominant of the industry. So I totally see the differences or like the challenges between the industries that I have experienced so far.
Yeah. What do you think, Laura?
I don't have a lot of experience in like many different levels. I guess it would be just aviation and software.
Yeah.
But for me, like in software, it's been pretty okay, especially in the Silicon Valley where I started working. There's lots of people from all over the world. I think it would be more of an issue in France where it's a little less multicultural. But it's been mostly fine where I've been. In the aviation side, there's very little startups that are like kind of like the same kind of publicity as you could see in the Silicon Valley. But most of the time, I think if there were in Silicon Valley, uh, I've noticed from the ones that I've seen that it was pretty okay.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Fabian?
Well, I guess I'm at the crossroads, right? Like doing fintech, it's exactly as you can imagine. I think, on the tech side, it's super diverse. And everything related to, I think, innovation and tech development, really welcoming. And I would say also, like, that's where an opportunity is because you can, in the US, if you have a good product, people are looking at it, experimenting it, not too judgmental. So it's really the land of opportunity there. And that's really how I see it. Or it's that side, the tech, fintech, even going to, blockchain or DeFi, super diverse, welcoming. It's really a mixed. And then, yes, there is the traditional side of it, right? The banking. There are about almost like 5,000 banks and financial institutions in the US, and yeah, it's more old school. Let's say it's more white dudes and prone to disruption, but still, yeah, and maybe probably not on the side of progressive type of values, and it's more challenging on that side. It's also changing, so it's a bit more positive, and it's really a side I like in the US of like the openness to something new. And although like at first they have that bias I was mentioning, but still they would look at what you're doing, at your business, at your product, and judge you for what you deliver, which I think is also super important and key. So
Yeah, yeah. The last question, I'll come back to you, Fabian. What advice would you give to an immigrant founder who's just come to the US to build the business of their dreams?
I really think of like, joining communities, as many as you can that are relevant to your story. For me,
Yeah,
it's the startup community, of course, but also French American
yeah.
communities,
Okay.
fintech communities, and exactly like you were saying, I think they are layering to form a little bit your own like identity and help you thrive, and you can leverage all those communities. And I also think that whatever you think is, a challenge to overcome, you can make it also a force. Several times I mentioned my, thick accent. Well, I've learned to use it to get people's attention and have a very quiet room or session where people are actually really listening, actively listening. So when you're aware of that, yeah, try to use it in a way that can help you, get your point across. And so be positive about being an immigrant and leverage that as a strength and communities that can help you get there and connect with people.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Adam?
Yeah, I want to echo Fabian on that. Building your own community is very critical in order to survive this challenging journey of your life, right? Exciting, also challenging as well. Your community, a support community, can be your family, can be your friends, who just like maybe like just someone strangers who just believe in you, like, even though what you're doing, but they believe you because you're a great person, and you have to believe that in yourself as well. And another thing is like finding. I think like there are a lot of tools that on online these days that you can find to help yourself getting through this difficult time. For example, like if you're stressed, there are like tools for you to help you with like meditations, and like just be open or like be resourceful in terms of that.
Wonderful. And lastly, Laura?
I would say my first advice would be for someone who's just fresh off the boat, as you would say, is apply to the green card lottery. Do it now because it actually does work. It made me, gain like 5 or 6 years of my immigration experience there. So it's worth trying. It's free. Second would be to build your network. It's key. I've found that a lot of the opportunities that I've had over the years were because of like I can almost trace it back to like that one person I reached out to once that I was worried about. Like I was anxious. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to that event and talk to this person. I'm going to force myself to go talk to them, even if it's terrifying. And then you can kind of see the nebula of other connections that derive from that initial contact you had with this one person. And obviously, like starting with the LGBT groups, international groups, because Americans are tough to befriend. Like they're they're okay like at initial contact, but then to actually be long-term friends with like I would say traditional Americans that were born there, that had school, and they're kind of not hiring new friends, so to speak. It's tough. And another one that I've noticed, especially since I moved back to France, is when you're using a network like Twitter, like an app like Twitter, it's actually more localized than we may think. I've noticed that since moving here, a lot of people from the UK started responding to me because I tweet in English, I don't tweet in French. But the people that respond to me, that see my tweets in real time, would be the ones from the UK. And I have a lot of less contacts especially in the East Coast. It feels, I don't know if it's like algorithmically different, but they will probably, like if you want to have a conversation with someone on Twitter, it's probably more efficient to have it in their time zone. So if it's a tweet that's directed at someone from the US, I usually will keep it for until like late at night here. So it reaches them, at a time that's good for them. So I would say if you're moving to a new country, just bear that in mind. If you want to, make friends and talk to people that are locally to you, like local to you, use that as a way to network and talk to them.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and one last thing that I want to add is like embrace your background differences. Like be proud of who you are and embrace the differences, right? Like when I was younger, I was very timid and very like I had a lot of self doubt, but throughout this journey and with a lot of support from my community, friends, and start out per se, I started to see more value of myself. And I would think like one thing that I always say to myself is like use those disadvantages and turn them into your advantages, because like the world is changing rapidly, and you don't know, just like don't be shy to ask. Like people are always there for you, like strangers or not.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you so much for all of that. I think we're gonna open up for questions. So if there's anybody who has any questions, I think Martina is here to help. Are there any questions? I see we do have a lot of immigrants in the group, though. I'm not seeing any questions just yet.
I think like instead of question, like we can ask our attendees like their experience, how they have experience, or they can like share their stories with us as well.
Yeah, what an innovator.
Any risk taker, I guess. I see that like Kenny, who is also like double immigrants, as he said in the chat. Kenny Wong. Or Jane.
There's one question.
What would you suggest for a person living in Latin America? Oh, that's an interesting one.
Green card lottery.
Yeah.
You have the option. Like it's not available to all countries, but it actually is available to. It's a diversity lottery, so if it's a country like I think if Mexico you can't do it, and the UK you can't, China I think it's not possible as well, India, but for many other countries it's possible.
Yeah,
Wow.
So
They
just
would
try
add,
that.
and also another
also add
route
that
like,
there are many
sorry.
professional like organizations as well. I'm thinking that it's one of the partners of Bunny Money, but the American Mexican Association, for example. But for each country, there are many organizations like that that help people, immigrants, to really connect with the community and help them with resources that you can look at and that like you could leverage. And there is probably like more organization than you think there is. So I doing some research and finding those could be a good relay for you, and discuss with people who exactly made the move and experience what you're experiencing.
And also there are so many routes to be able to live in, I would say, North America, including Canada, because Canada is also another great options. And there are many different types of like visa, green card lottery, or H-1B. There's also like one visa if you are very talented artist or something, you can look into that. Or even like you are great scientist with a lot of like news coverage or a great invention, you can also apply for that too.
Have you found? I've found embassies events on international groups have good networking opportunities. Okay. Nice.
See a question from Martina as well. I did find like helpful for me, like there is a French founders and some other like French American type of organizations, and they have been resourceful to me as an entrepreneur and really making business connections, like partnerships. Like some of Bunny Money partners are coming from that network. So yes, I think that because you're already been in the same situation, spot history, moving to the country, that creates an additional link. Like I made some other partnerships through Start Out a little bit in the same way. That's the type of community / networks that I think is worth leveraging when you're in the country. And it's really, business oriented. Again, I insist on that. It's just not, it's social, but it's more than that. It's making business together. So both are really resources as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And also like I think like try Meetup, and that's how I remember I started to get to know about Start Out, because I went to a Start event back in San Francisco like a few years ago, and I found it on meetup.com. So there are a lot of events online that you can try out and find your people there.
Go on, Fabian. What's your experience with immigrant VCs in USA? Yana or Jana is asking the question.
I think like immigrant VCs, or I would say very fun to talk to, because like they understand what you have been through. They're also very communicative and very supportive. For example, like Ben Stoke, one of our investors into Tomtex, and also he's a part of like StarL and Genjos as well. He's been my great champion even like before he invested in Tomtex, and we actually like we all need that kind of like person to help us with this journey.
Any more opinions on that question?
We never raised funding, so
Yen thinks that Meetup has a lot of options. Yeah, some are better than others. Yeah, I think I've met a few really good people on Meetup as well.
Yeah, I think with the VCs, the conversation is going through like really the business plan and your product, and I think they go beyond the accent and hope so. I'm sure they like to connect locally, but now I believe like especially like VCs know that successful companies are also like diverse, because you're building a better product or service when you're diverse, and I believe it's more and more known. It's maybe not everywhere, but I would think that VCs are actually more receptive to that diversity component than some others. But just in the middle of capital raise, so I can tell you more in some time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even personally, there's not much of a startup ecosystem, even apart from Barbados, in the region, in the Caribbean. So, my experience has been largely in New York, where it's very, very, very diverse, and you have a large group of all kinds of different people. And I quite like the ecosystem there, and that's why. And even though my company, we're kind of testing here in Barbados, the community is still in the United States. Martina has said, I found it challenging raising money through crowdfunding campaign as an immigrant founder because of the lack of network in the US. Have you experienced similar challenges?
I can speak a little bit on that because we just did a crowdfunding campaign for Money. I think at the end we were at 65% coming from the US and 35% coming from the rest of the world, including my home country. A little bit the same. I think you can get some benefits of accessing different networks, including your original country, and try to leverage the two. So we did things like specific email links in French to leverage that network and friends and family. Whereas we were also doing some other communications for the US, targeting our early users and investors. I guess if you are just arriving, you are lacking the network. That would be true. I think you need to build some sort of network, business network, or through the communities to reach out more people. I think it's a challenge. Is it more a challenge than if you were staying locally? I'm not sure. It's a question of how much circles you can reach out, I think. And so having those in mind and trying to again activate them is really the challenge for crowdfunding campaigns and some other things.
Yeah. Any more experiences with crowdfunding?
I don't have experience in like crowdfunding per se, so because my industry is completely different.
Yeah, and Laura has not.
No, we haven't. Like I guess the users buying our products from day one was the crowdfunding part.
Nice. Okay, I'm not sure if there are any more questions. So I don't know if you all have any last words before we depart. Start with you, Laura.
I would say like kind of I like what Adam said, like be proud of yourself. I think it's just if someone before I transitioned, I showed up to one meeting one time where it was in Santa Monica, but back when I lived in LA, and I was never like one to dress, even though I'm from France. I like the guy clothes just I didn't care for, so I showed up in like sneakers and shorts and t-shirt because it's it's LA. Like why would you show up in suit and tie, and it was at a flight school. And the guy, like, that's actually one of the, I forgot this story, but like it's kind of immigrant related because he didn't take it seriously. Like I was just alone in the meeting and my business partner was on the phone, and they were all wearing suits and ties in Santa Monica. And at some point I got tired of it because he was kind of belittling us because of the French origins. And they're the one who reached out to us to begin with. So they wanted our help, but they kept treating us like dirt. And at the end of the day, if someone that's what I told my business partner, if someone doesn't want to deal with me the way I am right now, then it's not a right fit. I don't want to have to change who I am just because that's the way they're acting. Of course, if it's like, there's always ways to arrange things. If it's someone wants to buy us for like $15 billion, then
it's a fine line to walk, right?
Yeah,
you have
like,
to find a
but-
balance. Yeah.
Right. If it's just like someone who wants to work with us, and I can see that there's going to be a problem with being myself around them, then I'm probably going to be like going separate ways with these people, and it's what we did. We just didn't work with them, and I said if our origins or the way I dress is a problem for you, then it's not going to work out.
Atom?
I think like reach out to as many people as possible. Be a part of a group that believe in you and support you. Join Style. I think it's always been the communicate and the community has always been there for me from the beginning of my journey. So I am very happy and grateful to be a part of Style.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Vivian?
Yeah, it's the same, I guess. But be positive and proud of your origins and who you are. I really believe that makes a difference. And be optimistic. Even if there are challenges, turn them into a more like positive asset and force. And feel free to also reach out if you need support, tips or whatever. I think we are available also as an immigrant entrepreneur to support other immigrant entrepreneurs. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
We are here. I mean, we are there for each other. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all. It's been really good getting to know you and talking to you. And I'll leave with this one quote that we have here from Atom: "Be proud of who you are and embrace your difference."
thank you.
Have a good day, you all.
It's a good one.
Thank you
Thank
all
you.
for your time, and thank you all the attendees for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.